For nearly 2 decades, Our Lady of Peace Convent stood undisturbed behind brick walls and iron gates on the outskirts of Tarrydale, Illinois. Visitors rarely came. The grounds were silent, the stained glass unbroken. But between 1932 and 1951, 22 women registered to the convent were recorded as having departed voluntarily, without forwarding address, family notification, or subsequent trace. Most were classified as early retirements or transfers. None were ever seen again. Founded in 1899 by the Sisters of St. Bede, Our Lady of Peace Convent presented itself as a sanctuary for spiritual reflection and service. Promotional brochures from the 1930s described it as a place of quiet education and uninterrupted peace, where novitiates learned skills ranging from herbal medicine to hand embroidery. Annual reports submitted to the Archdiocese listed healthy retention rates and above-average literacy among its residents. It was never considered a place of concern. Few diocesan visitors remained overnight. Clerical inspections, when they occurred, were brief. And yet between 1932 and 1951, the pattern of disappearance, 1 or 2 nuns every year, remained unnoticed. Beginning Chapter 1, Part 1. The town of Tarrydale had long regarded the convent with a mix of indifference and reverence. Located nearly 4 miles outside the town limits, it occupied 17 acres of wooded land, purchased through an anonymous donation in the late 19th century. The architecture was Romanesque, with slate roofs and sandstone arches that resisted seasonal decay. A bell tower, installed in 1907, marked the hours with predictable chimes. Internally, the convent operated on a strict but stable schedule. Days began at 5 a.m. with silent prayer, followed by labor rotations, classes, and shared meals. Records indicate an average population of 35 nuns, with around 6 novices admitted per year. Most came from rural families in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. They arrived after completing basic catechism and were assigned duties based on temperament and ability. Some were sent to manage the convent's orchard or preserve library materials. Others worked in the modest textile room or tended the infirmary. By 1932, the convent had received regional attention for its embroidered altar cloths and botanical remedies, which were sold discreetly to nearby parishes. Income from these efforts supported the maintenance of the property and allowed for the rare hiring of outside labor, typically tradesmen for boiler maintenance or roofing work. All men contracted by the convent were required to check in at the front office and were never permitted beyond the first hallway unless accompanied. The convent's public-facing order was the result of careful planning by Sister Letitia Marlowe, who served as Mother Superior from 1929 to 1956. She had a reputation for procedural exactness and maintained regular correspondence with diocesan officials. Letters archived from her tenure reveal her concern with discipline and appearance. Visitors noted her calm demeanor, her attention to detail, and her tendency to deflect questions regarding internal policies. In March of 1932, Sister Agnes Weller was recorded as having departed the convent to rejoin family in Columbus. Her departure was logged with a standard single-paragraph entry. No contact information was provided. Her personal effects were reportedly mailed later. In August of the same year, Sister Doreen Petrowski was reported transferred to Immaculate Heart Convent, Nebraska. However, no intake forms from that convent mention her name, and no subsequent diocesan census includes her. In both cases, no search was conducted. The official explanation was that religious sisters often relocated quietly, particularly when facing personal doubts or health concerns. At the time, the diocese discouraged inquiry into such matters, labeling them private spiritual transitions. Year after year, similar departures followed. Some were recorded as relocations. Others were vaguely attributed to medical needs. In 1934 alone, 3 nuns left within a 5-month span. Their names disappeared from the census rolls and were never mentioned again in internal newsletters. Yet the convent's public face remained untouched. Newsletters continued to highlight anniversaries, charity events, and minor structural renovations. During inspection visits, no issues were noted. The convent was always quiet, orderly, and clean. An accountant from the diocese who reviewed the 1935 financial report remarked on the high spending allocated to special repairs. The line item had been used every year since 1931, yet no building permits or external renovations were recorded in town files. When questioned, Sister Letitia replied that these repairs referred to internal matters not subject to public review. In December of 1937, Sister Eleanor Breckman's name was removed from the prayer registry. Her departure, like those before, was marked only by a change in a ledger. That same month, 2 novices were added to the household. No mention of Eleanor was made again. The ledger entries grew over time, always brief, never detailed. By 1940, 10 women had left without reappearance. The youngest was 22. The oldest was 43. Some had served for over a decade. Most had no recorded family. All had taken full vows. From the town's perspective, nothing changed. The convent bell continued to chime. The postman left deliveries without speaking. When snowfall came, the grounds remained impeccably shoveled. Even those who passed on rural delivery routes rarely saw any movement. By the time Sister Lucinda Bell left in 1943, she was the 12th to vanish under administrative silence. Her file listed emergency departure, with no forwarding notes. She had worked in the infirmary for 6 years. Her handwriting remained in several medical logbooks. After her name was removed, new entries were signed only with initials. What troubled some former residents, though not openly discussed, was that many of these departures occurred just after scheduled confession weeks or following unscheduled archdiocesan letters. One former novice interviewed decades later under pseudonym recalled that certain letters were never to be seen by the younger sisters. Despite the irregularities, no one intervened. The reason was structural. In 1944, a revised charter gave Our Lady of Peace full internal authority over its personnel records. This meant that as long as the convent filed basic census updates and remained within its budget, the archdiocese was no longer required to conduct detailed oversight. Chapter 1, Part 2 next. Between 1944 and 1947, Our Lady of Peace maintained its outward consistency. The gardens were trimmed each spring. The schoolroom chalkboards were updated with scripture lines in careful script. Every quarter, parcels arrived from the diocese containing cloth, sacramentals, and medical supplies. Postal records confirmed steady shipments, though outgoing correspondence dropped noticeably. In early 1945, a new archdiocesan policy required each convent to submit anonymous well-being assessments from its members. These were intended as morale indicators, part of a wartime pastoral initiative. At Our Lady of Peace, the forms were reportedly filled out in silence over the course of one afternoon. When compiled, the responses reflected identical phrasing and penmanship. Several entries used identical wording to previous year's reports, raising questions among record keepers in the archdiocesan office. A brief note was added to the convent's file. Assessments reviewed, uniform responses, recommend observation. No further action was recorded. That same year, 2 sisters were formally dismissed for voluntary secularization. One had served in the scriptorium, the other as kitchen steward. Neither name appears in civil directories after the date of departure. The convent groundsman, Mr. Theodore Almson, worked there from 1936 until his retirement in 1950. In later testimony to a clerical investigator, he stated that deliveries increased after 1943, especially cement and timber, but there were never new sheds. He recalled being asked to unload several pallets labeled storage shelving, yet never saw them installed. When he inquired, he was told they were assigned to lower storage. According to his payroll logs, Mr. Almson only entered the building up to the first vestibule. He was not permitted access to internal corridors. Most of his time was spent repairing fences, trimming hedges, and inspecting drainage canals at the south end of the property. He signed a confidentiality clause in 1942, standard for all non-clerical staff. In 1946, Sister Genevieve Quade's record was amended with the note, transferred for health concerns. She had previously overseen accounts and correspondence. Her handwriting is the last known script in the visitor ledger. After her name was removed, the log entries switched to printed block letters. The style shift was noted in a clerical audit, but attributed to formatting change. The convent maintained its place in the Tarrydale annual census, listed each year under religious non-profit holdings. Its property tax exemption remained intact. No disputes were recorded. A local librarian, who had volunteered briefly at the convent in her youth, described the building as quiet but not unfriendly, just very still. She remembered being asked to leave her belongings at the gate and to avoid stepping off the stone path leading to the foyer. Newspaper archives from this period rarely mention the convent. It appeared only in passing in a 1947 article regarding a diocesan fundraiser. The event took place in Rockford. No representatives from Our Lady of Peace attended. A proxy donation was listed, submitted anonymously. When Sister Marybeth Cole was marked unavailable for reassignment in early 1948, she had just completed her 10th year teaching Latin to younger sisters. Her materials remained in the classroom. Notes left on the blackboard were still visible when a visiting inspector passed through later that spring. He reported the room as functional if outdated. No mention was made of her departure. The practice of silent erasure became institutional habit. It was not an overt policy, but rather a gradual alignment of form and omission. When new sisters arrived, they were given revised directories with current names only. Previous names were not archived in public view. Internal memorials were absent. There were no photographs on display. By 1950, archdiocesan attention returned briefly to the convent due to a reorganization of property assignments. Our Lady of Peace was reviewed for possible integration into a regional teaching network. A clerical site visit was conducted. The official, Reverend Holden, spent 3 hours on location. His report was concise. Well-kept grounds, no anomalies, administrative clarity, recommend continued independence. 3 weeks later, Sister Lucille Ames was marked as relocated. Her records included a note, documents to remain on site. She had handled internal training materials and maintained liturgical inventory. After her departure, the inventory logs were replaced with a numerical system. Item descriptions were abbreviated or removed. A letter preserved in the diocesan archive, dated April 14, 1951, includes a brief inquiry from another convent. We request update on Sister Lucille's arrival. She is yet to be received. No response is filed. That summer, a maintenance review revealed structural inconsistencies in the eastern wing. Blueprints did not match internal dimensions. Walls were listed as being 12 feet across, but measured 15. Annotations in the review include the phrase non-standard partitioning, though no request for correction was filed. That same month, Sister Denise Farley's name was quietly withdrawn from all schedules. She had worked primarily in bookkeeping. Her desk remained locked until late autumn when it was cleared by administrative order. None of her files were preserved. Later that year, the Archdiocese released a new policy limiting the use of blank transfer designations. Convents were now required to provide the receiving location or official reason for departures. The rule applied to all institutions retroactively, beginning with the 1950 census year. In response, Our Lady of Peace submitted a one-page amendment. It listed no names. Instead, it contained the phrase, "All personnel transfers prior to this date were completed under internal protocol and are closed." The diocesan office filed the page without comment. Between 1932 and 1951, 22 nuns were officially recorded as having left the convent. In no case was there a civilian forwarding address, reappearance in public directories, or confirmed sighting at another institution. None of the departures involved formal releases from vows. No exclaustration papers were filed. To external observers, the convent remained a serene, well-regulated place. Gardens bloomed each spring. The bell chimed its regular intervals. There were no legal filings, no complaints, no formal investigations. For 2 decades, Our Lady of Peace stood untouched. By the early 1950s, routine correspondence from Our Lady of Peace had diminished. The convent submitted quarterly reports on time, but without the supplemental letters or updates that had characterized previous years. Diocesan clerks noted the reduced volume, but attributed it to administrative transitions, not absence of oversight. One indication that internal irregularities may have been noticed earlier came from an overlooked batch of letters discovered decades later in the Archdiocesan archive. The letters, sealed in a file labeled miscellaneous non-urgent, were never officially logged. Most were short, unsigned, and written on aged stationery bearing the convent's crest. The handwriting varied. Some letters contained minor complaints about labor distribution. Others referenced confusion over reassignment notices. One, dated September 1948, mentioned a sister who had been removed from rotation, but whose effects remained in her quarters. The line, "We are not told to ask questions," appears twice. These documents were never acknowledged in diocesan records. Their existence remained unknown until a cataloguing effort in the late 1980s. By then, many original administrators and staff were deceased or untraceable. In 1952, a provincial education officer, Sister Emmeline Varr, visited the convent to review pedagogical materials for integration into a diocesan curriculum initiative. Her report, stored at the Central Bureau, noted unusual uniformity among the teaching aids. She described lesson plans as curiously replicated across subjects and commented that all writing appeared to originate from a single source. When she asked about co-authorship or collaboration, she was informed that materials are compiled under the guidance of the Superior's office. She also observed that the convent did not maintain student lists, as it had not received boarding applicants since 1946. The educational component of the convent, she noted, seemed maintained primarily for internal practice. During her visit, Sister Emmeline was accompanied by a chaperone throughout the main corridors. She was not permitted to visit the lower wings or garden-level archives. Her written request to examine the infirmary was denied, citing seasonal sanitation. She recorded these details in a personal memorandum, but did not escalate them formally. She did, however, raise concern over the lack of variance in handwriting samples found in teaching materials. Her memo includes the phrase, "single-hand duplication suspected, further inquiry recommended." No evidence suggests this recommendation was pursued. Around the same period, a Jesuit seminarian conducting research for a thesis on rural convent architecture reached out to Our Lady of Peace for historical layout plans. He received a brief reply noting that original plans had been revised multiple times and are not available for academic study. He was instead offered a summary diagram, which lacked scale and contained no annotations. His notes, archived in a university collection, described the building as visibly older than indicated and mentioned signs of foundation patchwork along the east exterior. He also observed boarded windows on the rear wing, which were not present in early photographs. No complaints were filed regarding these changes. The local municipal office maintained property records showing no formal alterations between 1935 and 1955. Annual inspections confirmed roof repairs and plumbing updates, but did not account for interior modifications. In 1953, a former novice from the 1940 intake class submitted a letter to the Diocesan Advisory Committee. Now secularized and residing in Des Moines, she had recently requested access to her former residence records. Her request was declined. She wrote a second letter stating that her final weeks at the convent were confused by sudden schedule changes, and that a friend who had entered with me was no longer mentioned. Her letter asked only whether that friend had been relocated. The advisory committee's reply confirmed that movement of personnel is managed internally and that no additional information can be provided. There is no indication that follow-up correspondence was pursued. This pattern of withheld acknowledgement extended into minor logistical areas. When a Tarrydale contractor sent a maintenance inquiry regarding an overgrown access road adjacent to the convent property, he received a short notice indicating that grounds are maintained exclusively by internal staff. His offer to perform clearing at no cost was politely declined. The road in question had historically served as a secondary route for deliveries, especially during flooding seasons. By the mid-1950s, it was almost entirely blocked by overgrowth. Local maps continued to show it as active, though aerial surveys suggested otherwise. Town residents occasionally raised mild questions about the convent's seclusion. A 1954 letter to the Tarrydale Weekly editorial page asked whether Our Lady of Peace still accepted public mass attendees. The convent's reply, printed a week later, stated that attendance at mass is limited to invited guests and scheduled ecclesiastical observers. There were no objections from the diocese. The convent's autonomy had been reinforced through multiple administrative revisions. Under a 1951 clause, spiritual houses serving fewer than 40 residents were permitted to manage entry policies without external approval. Sister Letitia Marlowe, still acting as superior, continued to issue occasional statements to the archdiocese, most under 100 words. These included annual affirmations of doctrinal alignment and brief updates on property status. Her final letter, dated July 1955, thanked the office for its continued trust and restated her commitment to protecting spiritual rhythms from disruption. Internal correspondence from the Diocesan Planning Council reveals that her tenure was seen as a model of consistency and that no successors were being considered at the time. She was noted for stability of environment and reliability in census compliance. Despite this external impression, clerical notes from a deacon assigned to a summer inventory program show growing doubts. During a 1955 site review, he recorded that the convent's supply room contained excess quantities of cleaning chemicals and building sealants. The quantities were inconsistent with household use. When questioned, the convent steward explained they were part of a long-term preservation strategy. The deacon's notes include the phrase, "smell of lacquer prevalent beyond the lower hall." He made no formal complaint, but added a handwritten tag reading, "Return with chaperone if permitted." No second visit was recorded. That same summer, the diocesan office received its first inquiry from a regional medical board. A former convent nurse, now employed at a county facility, had listed Our Lady of Peace as a prior employer. The board requested confirmation of her duties. The convent's response did not arrive until 3 months later. It contained a single line, "No record available." The nurse, whose name appears in diocesan employment records for 1942, was not informed of the response. She left the profession shortly afterward. No additional details regarding her employment are known. While these signs accumulated slowly and were never individually flagged as irregular, they reveal a consistent narrowing of external access. By the mid-1950s, Our Lady of Peace had effectively removed itself from routine scrutiny. Though technically in compliance with administrative standards, it operated with decreasing visibility and minimal response to standard queries. In October 1955, a regional clerical census required all religious institutions to verify resident identities through a standardized form. While most convents submitted lists with full names and dates of entry, Our Lady of Peace provided initials only, accompanied by years of service and assigned roles. The document included a note explaining that spiritual privacy is respected in all house records. The response did not breach compliance, as the new regulation lacked enforcement clauses. However, the vagueness drew internal attention. A margin annotation in the diocesan file reads, "Notation style inconsistent with sister house protocol." No formal revision request was filed. At the same time, the convent declined to participate in a regional spiritual retreat hosted by St. Jerome's Seminary. All other houses in the district were represented. When asked for a reason, Sister Letitia submitted a typed message citing seasonal obligations on property. The seminary filed no objection. In early 1956, Sister Letitia formally resigned her position, citing advanced age. Her tenure had spanned nearly 3 decades. The resignation was processed quietly. No public statement was issued. Her replacement, Sister Adelaide Corbin, submitted a brief introductory letter in which she described her leadership goals as gentle stewardship and maintenance of rhythm. She inherited a house with few external relationships. Archival reviews show that the convent had not received a pastoral visit in over 3 years. All administrative exchanges took place via courier or post. Packages arrived regularly but were rarely acknowledged. Sister Adelaide's early correspondence contains subtle shifts in tone. Where Sister Letitia had used passive ceremonial language, Adelaide's letters were pragmatic and concise. A document dated April 1956 confirms her request to limit inspections to alternate spring years, citing ongoing cloister adaptation. The request was granted without discussion. Later that spring, a diocesan bursar assigned to review supply allocations noted irregular ordering patterns from Our Lady of Peace. The convent had requested an unusual volume of lime-based sealants and non-marking paint. These were not standard requisitions for rural religious facilities. When asked for clarification, the convent replied that materials were used for weather correction in lower corridors. The bursar's memo includes the sentence, "Supply justification vague but consistent with prior cycles." The file was closed with no further inquiry. In June of that year, a former grounds labourer submitted a handwritten letter to the diocesan staff office. He had served briefly in 1952 and now sought employment verification. He wrote that he remembered being assigned to unlisted sections of the grounds and was unclear on the nature of the work performed. His inquiry was received, acknowledged, and filed. No employment record under his name was located. The personnel office replied that labour assignments from that year were privately contracted and cannot be verified. The file was annotated. No action required. In August 1956, a provincial librarian assigned to inventory historical materials from religious institutions contacted Our Lady of Peace to arrange a site visit. Her project involved collecting unused books and archived homilies for diocesan cataloguing. She received a reply signed by Sister Adelaide stating that internal texts are preserved under specific reflection policies and are not eligible for relocation. The librarian noted the unusual wording and reported it to her supervisor, who confirmed that such refusals, while rare, were within policy. No follow-up was requested. The librarian did, however, record a personal note from a phone call placed to the convent before receiving the letter. A sister who answered the phone identified herself only by role, not name, and spoke in measured syllables. When asked about visiting hours, the sister replied, "No outside presence during preparation periods." The call was concluded politely. Meanwhile, the town of Tarrydale began a property records update that involved site verifications of all institutions. When the municipal inspector arrived at the convent gate, he was met by a lay representative who provided a prepared form stating that the convent was exempt from internal walkthroughs. The form bore the diocesan seal and was signed by a notary. The inspector, following municipal guidelines, accepted the form and recorded the exterior status only. His notes indicate that the property appeared well kept but unfrequented. He included a comment that no visible outdoor activity observed during midday check. In the same season, an electrician contracted by the local utility submitted a routine service estimate for underground line tracing. He noted that the convent's main electrical conduit had been rerouted underground in a manner not reflected in previous plans. The update had not been filed with town records. When he contacted the property, he was directed to leave inquiries in writing. A month later, he received a response indicating that the rerouting had been performed for sound regulation and continuity of power, and that all modifications had been internal. No permit was located. He filed a technical exception notice, which was later dismissed by the utilities office as non-disruptive to public service. By 1957, the number of outgoing messages from Our Lady of Peace had declined further. Only essential correspondence was maintained. Visitor logs, once kept for archdiocesan audits, were discontinued. Census forms were returned with initials and roles only. The convent now reported 28 resident members. During a scheduled inventory review that spring, a supply clerk from the archdiocese was asked to leave his report at the gate. He was not permitted entry. When he asked to verify the recipient's name, the sister responding simply said, "It will reach the proper hand." His report notes, "Calm and deliberate tone, no irregularity noted in conduct," followed by the line, "Unusual detachment from standard engagement." He was not asked to return. By late summer, Sister Adelaide issued her final recorded letter to the diocesan office. It consisted of 3 sentences confirming the receipt of liturgical materials and thanking the office for its steady patience. It closed with the phrase, "We maintain balance in quiet cycles." The convent did not send further letters that year. Census updates resumed the following spring, again listing initials and functions only. Though no formal complaint was ever filed against Our Lady of Peace, internal communications from the diocesan oversight staff increasingly referred to the property as sealed or closed to informal engagement. These references were not procedural, but reflective of a general impression that the convent had fully internalized its operations beyond expected visibility. No visitors were recorded for the entirety of 1958. The bell continued to mark time, the grounds remained trimmed, and the outer structures showed no signs of decay. The postal route confirmed regular delivery. Yet no external names appeared in correspondence, and no travel logs indicated movement to or from the house. The institution remained by all accounts intact. In April 1959, a clerical rotation brought Father Louis Denham to the Diocesan Administrative Office in Rockford. Assigned to oversee archival updates and site record consolidations, his tasks included verifying compliance documents from lesser-known religious institutions. Our Lady of Peace appeared early in his queue. Its last official census, dated the previous spring, reported 26 resident sisters. No specific names were provided, only initials and year of entry. Upon reviewing the associated property file, Denham noted that architectural floor plans from 1931 were still listed as current, despite indications of structural modification reported by utilities and inspectors over the preceding decade. He requested clarification through a formal information request. The response came 2 weeks later, signed by Sister Adelaide, stating that no external adjustments have altered the original spiritual footprint. The phrase was unfamiliar to him and flagged for further review. Denham continued by submitting a site visit request, citing a diocesan program for cultural record validation. His proposal stated that the purpose of the visit was to document internal chapel design and verify sacramental storage conditions. The convent acknowledged the request and provided a date, but specified that access will be limited to approved entry corridors. He arrived on a cool morning in May, accompanied by a seminary intern and a cart containing archival tools. They were greeted at the gate by a sister who declined to provide a name but introduced herself as house steward. She accepted Denham's credentials without comment and escorted the men through the main entryway. The interior was clean but unadorned. Hallways were lit by recessed bulbs. No religious icons were visible on the entry walls. The air held a faint scent of cleanser. Denham noted that the floors bore no signs of foot traffic. When asked about chapel access, the steward responded that it was currently in silence for observance. Instead, they were shown to a reading room that had been repurposed into a storage area for hymnals and binding materials. The room's window was boarded from the inside, the boards painted in a shade matching the wall. Denham marked the detail in his notebook. He also noted that the hymnals showed no recent pencil markings or bookmarks, and many appeared unused. The steward remained with them throughout. When Denham inquired about the total number of residents, she recited the current census total, but declined to specify further. When he asked about previous superiors, she replied only that records are kept with the rhythm. Before departing, Denham was handed a typed note indicating that no internal materials could be photographed or duplicated. The note bore the diocesan seal, although the seal was misaligned with the page header. He filed the visit report without protest, but requested follow-up access later that season. No response was received. In June, he returned to the convent unannounced, hoping to clarify discrepancies in census data. Upon arrival, he found the front gate locked. A small paper had been tacked to the gatepost, closed for private reflection. He left a note and returned to the diocesan office. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at his desk. Inside was a sealed envelope containing a single sheet listing the convent's initials-only census, revised by one name. No explanation was provided. The accompanying note read, "Cycle completed." Denham raised the matter with his superior, Monsignor Bray, who recommended no action. "Their records match their charter," he wrote in margin. "No violation present." Still unsettled, Denham began contacting other facilities in the region, seeking any reference to transferred sisters from Our Lady of Peace. Across 5 institutions, He found no entries matching the names or initials of any residents listed in recent census logs. He also found no death notices, departure records, or laicization forms. He submitted a formal memo to the Diocesan Legal Affairs Unit requesting a deeper record audit. The request was acknowledged but placed on hold. His rotation concluded that October, and the matter was left unresolved. The next documented development came in March 1960, when the Tarrydale Water Authority began a project to replace outdated lines near the convent's perimeter. Engineers performing pressure tests found unusually high mineral content in runoff from the eastern drainage basin. While not hazardous, the readings were inconsistent with other sites along the route. When the authority sent a request to access the adjacent segment of convent property for soil evaluation, they received a letter from the convent steward stating that land access is prohibited during seasonal maintenance. The letter did not include a date for rescheduling. The Water Authority flagged the file but continued its project without the test. The anomaly was noted in municipal archives as site-specific irregularity, no access granted. That summer, an archivist from the Diocesan Historical Bureau named Thomas Harwell submitted a separate access request for the convent's original incorporation documents. He had been assigned to compile a regional overview of religious foundations. When his request went unanswered, he contacted the diocesan office, which informed him that the convent maintained full custody of its foundation records. Unwilling to drop the matter, Harwell scheduled an in-person inquiry. When he arrived at the convent, he found the main gate open, but unattended. He walked to the entry bell and waited. After several minutes, a sister emerged, acknowledged his presence, and said the documents he requested could not be reviewed in public setting. She provided him with a printed history pamphlet, published in 1949, containing standard information about the founding and mission of the order. Harwell noted that no references in the text extended beyond 1939. When he pointed this out, the sister responded, "Our history is observed, not updated." He included this exchange in a report filed later that week, expressing concern about historical record gaps. The report was archived, but not acted upon. In early 1961, an independent surveyor employed by a land appraisal company entered the area surrounding the convent to gather data for a regional zoning update. His notes mention unusual grading near the northern fence line and indicate that the terrain appeared artificially leveled. When he returned for further measurements, he found new signage installed along the perimeter stating, "Entry limited by ecclesiastical reservation." These signs bore no diocesan insignia. The survey was completed using alternative routes. By 1962, mentions of the convent in diocesan publications had ceased entirely. It was no longer listed among regional educational contributors. Its name appeared only on annual property tax exemption summaries. The address remained unchanged. Mail deliveries were recorded as ongoing. No resignations or deaths were reported. The institution functioned without external engagement, yet maintained compliance in every official metric. Internal activity remained shielded. Public access was not denied by force or refusal, but rather by sustained ambiguity and procedural correctness. The pattern held. In June 1963, a diocesan archivist named Brother Raymond Tills initiated a record consolidation project designed to update entries for all convents established prior to 1910. Our Lady of Peace fell within his assigned region. Tills had no prior knowledge of the convent's history, but his preliminary findings led him to request the original admission rosters for the years 1930 to 1950. The response from the convent arrived in the form of a typed statement. It read, "Records from the requested period are considered internal observance materials. External duplication is respectfully declined." The letter bore no signature. Instead, a circular stamp labeled Office of Custodial Balance appeared in the lower left corner. No such office existed in diocesan structure. Tills inquired with his superior, who reviewed the communication and instructed him not to pursue further. He noted the convent's unique status and advised that their exemptions had been previously ratified. The exchange was closed with no documentation added to the main archive. That autumn, a diocesan geographer, Celia Haar, began recharting religious properties for inclusion in a civic land use survey. During a routine aerial photography run, she noticed inconsistencies in the physical layout of the Our Lady of Peace property. From above, shadow lines indicated structural boundaries inconsistent with the 1931 blueprint. She filed a request to cross-check with the original site schematics. Upon visiting the diocesan archives, she was informed that the convent had retained sole custody of all internal planning documents. Her request for an interview was forwarded to the convent's post office box, but received no reply. Celia compiled her observations in a technical appendix. She described the visible portions of the building as incongruous with archival form and noted the presence of roof fixtures not mentioned in any known plans. The appendix was accepted as a supplementary entry, but was not included in the official diocesan registry. In early 1964, the Tarrydale postmaster contacted the Diocesan Mail Services Office with a procedural question. He explained that postal volume to the convent had decreased significantly and that all deliveries were now received by a single individual who signed with only an initial. When he asked if routing procedures should change, he was advised to continue standard delivery. The postmaster filed a note for internal reference, stating that the receiving party never made requests, returned parcels, or provided change of address notifications. The note remained in local records, uncirculated beyond the town office. Later that year, a regional clerical council considered consolidating smaller convents due to budget adjustments. Our Lady of Peace was reviewed as a potential candidate. A report drafted by the financial compliance team flagged the property as low interaction, full archival independence, minimal external oversight. As part of the review, a team of 3 administrators scheduled a procedural visit. They were instructed to gather only physical layout observations and verify occupancy numbers. Upon arrival, they were met by a sister who identified herself only as rotation lead. She escorted them through a limited corridor, kept conversation minimal, and redirected all administrative questions to a small note card containing pre-written responses. These included phrases such as, "Internal coordination remains ongoing," and "Records remain in place under ordinance." The administrators submitted their notes to the financial board. Their conclusion was, "No breach, operation persistent. Recommend continuation without structural merge." No further integration steps were taken. In spring 1965, a diocesan engineering consultant named Harold Dreves visited the property as part of a utilities upgrade feasibility study. He intended to evaluate underground cable potential for several rural institutions. Upon inspecting the site's perimeter, he found no suitable access point. When he submitted a request for an internal junction box review, he received a response indicating that modifications to electrical configuration are self-managed under Property Exception Clause B12. He reviewed the diocesan charter and found that such a clause had been ratified in 1951, applying only to properties with full record retention authority. Our Lady of Peace qualified. He concluded his review without site entry. His report listed the convent's electrical infrastructure as self-contained, not subject to upgrade without voluntary compliance. The same year, a brief entry appeared in the Diocesan Index, noting that Our Lady of Peace had declined to submit an optional financial assistance form offered to rural religious orders. The form was part of a program to support maintenance costs during enrollment reductions. The convent provided no reason for its refusal. In July 1966, an article in the Rockford Clerical Bulletin listed Our Lady of Peace in a footnote regarding properties with non-public-facing practices. The note carried no editorial remark and appeared as a statistical reference only. Privately, several diocesan staff members noted the growing span of time since any full census had included verifiable names from the convent. While not a breach of compliance, it stood in contrast to every other institution in the region. A meeting was held in October 1966 to address legacy properties with minimal interaction. Attendees included clerical staff from multiple departments. When Our Lady of Peace was mentioned, the consensus was that the property, while administratively distant, remained aligned through silence rather than absence. The final decision was to allow continued operation without request for expanded transparency. An internal note recorded this as deference based on historical continuity. As the 1960s progressed, references to Our Lady of Peace became increasingly sparse. In the Diocesan Yearbook of 1967, the convent's entry was reduced to a line beneath property holdings, omitting census numbers entirely. A single mention appeared in the diocesan logistics file that same year. It referred to a delivery confirmation involving altar linens. The receipt was signed only with a stamped symbol, later identified as a cross, enclosed in a circle, not used elsewhere in diocesan documentation. In January 1968, a clerical candidate preparing a thesis on cloistered order logistics requested to tour several historical properties. Our Lady of Peace was among the proposed sites. His request was acknowledged, but the convent replied that instructional presence is not part of current cycle. The candidate, noting the unusual phrasing, removed the site from his list. His thesis proceeded with alternate locations. No further requests for access were recorded that year. No new reports were filed. The institution remained as it had, visible but unreachable. In March 1969, a regional review of redundant diocesan assets led to the identification of 5 properties for potential divestment. Among them was Our Lady of Peace, listed on internal documents as inactive for diocesan programming. The term was administrative, not reflective of closure. However, the classification required the property to undergo an updated site verification. An assessor, appointed by the Diocesan Land Committee, was instructed to confirm existing boundaries, record visible use of structures, and note any obstacles to future reassignment. The assessor, Edwin Tarl, had performed dozens of such visits. His report, filed 12 days later, listed the property as functionally enclosed. He observed no signs of damage, no posted hours, and no apparent traffic in or out. His field notes included a short comment: no visible personnel, gate secured, ambient sound consistent with rural settings. The diocesan file was updated with this remark and marked for review in the next fiscal quarter. In the meantime, no formal inquiry was launched. That summer, a fire safety inventory was conducted across all rural religious holdings. The program was initiated following updated insurance requirements. Each site was to receive a visit from a certified technician who would assess extinguishing systems, egress protocols, and storage hazards. When the technician, Marla Sevran, arrived at Our Lady of Peace, she found the perimeter gate open but unstaffed. She entered the outer path, waited at the main doorway, and eventually rang a modest hanging bell. After several minutes, a sister appeared. She declined to provide her name and asked Sevran to leave all paperwork on a small stool near the door. Sevran explained her purpose. The sister nodded, then responded, "Internal audits suffice." When Sevran offered to reschedule or provide documentation from the diocese, the sister again pointed to the stool. No access was granted. The technician recorded this refusal in her report, but classified the risk level as low, citing the building's visible maintenance and rural isolation. The insurer accepted the report. The file remained dormant. In January 1970, a clerical assistant compiling anniversary notices for institutional foundations attempted to locate a detailed origin narrative for the convent. The original founding year had been listed as 1899, but her request for foundational minutes, early correspondences, and inaugural liturgy records went unanswered. Her note, later filed in the reference index, stated, "No public commemorative plans recorded, no response to archival outreach." The space intended for anniversary commentary was left blank. Around this time, the building's name was removed from the Regional Vocations Directory. According to a notarial note, the convent had not accepted postulants since 1946, and the listing was considered obsolete. The removal prompted no reaction from the convent. In 1971, an assistant to the diocesan archivist initiated a project to microfilm old facility rosters. When he reached the Our Lady of Peace entries, he found only summary totals for each year. His request for original manuscripts was denied. A return letter stated that documents remain under solemn internal register. The assistant recorded this phrase in his project log and moved on to the next location. In April 1972, a district engineer performing aerial triangulation for highway planning included several photographs of the convent in his submission. The images showed the eastern quadrant of the structure, including an annex not present in municipal or diocesan drawings. He submitted the discrepancy to the diocesan asset manager. The response acknowledged the image, but noted that many religious institutions had constructed provisional expansions during the post-war period, often without municipal documentation. No action was taken. Over the next 5 years, references to Our Lady of Peace grew sporadic. Its budgetary line item remained stable, assigned only to routine property tax exemptions and the receipt of essential diocesan materials. Mail continued to be delivered. No complaints or public inquiries were recorded. In 1978, an administrative intern, preparing a facilities update booklet, noticed the absence of any photographs from the convent taken after 1940. When she contacted the diocesan photography office, she learned that no staff had been granted visual access to the site in over 4 decades. She submitted a formal request to conduct a new exterior shoot. The reply she received stated that the current observance period precludes image capture. No date for renewal was provided. The booklet omitted the convent. In 1981, the diocese transitioned to digital census records. Each convent was asked to submit verified data, including full names of residents and clerical roles. Our Lady of Peace returned a typed form containing only a statement. Total residents, 14, all in standing observance. Role fluidity remains internal. This response did not align with the new system's input fields. A clerk entered the total manually and marked the entry as limited return. The system allowed the exception without error. Between 1982 and 1986, 2 attempts were made to confirm diocesan-wide compliance with updated insurance assessments. Our Lady of Peace did not respond to either notification. The property was eventually classified as low interaction, no verified change. In late 1987, a third-party archival team began digitizing correspondence related to pre-1950 convent activities. In reviewing files from auxiliary diocesan offices, the team discovered a series of handwritten letters sent anonymously from the vicinity of Tarrydale between 1946 and 1951. Each letter mentioned departures of sisters by name. None of the names matched official laicization or transfer records. One letter included a diagram of the convent's lower floor with an area marked Quiet Block. Another stated, "They never go past the 8th bell." The archival team flagged the materials and notified the diocesan historian. A decision was made to withhold public release pending further verification. The letters were scanned, categorized, and stored under restricted access. No review was initiated. In the spring of 1988, the Diocesan Planning Council initiated a restructuring of properties considered inactive in public ministry. Our Lady of Peace was among the holdings listed for potential conversion to archive or housing use. The property had remained exempt for over 50 years, but the council required a final status confirmation before issuing decisions. An assessor, Maureen Kell, was assigned to conduct a preliminary review. Her task included verifying structural integrity, occupancy activity, and grounds accessibility. She arrived in late May and found the perimeter unchanged. The gate was latched but not locked. Grass along the entry path was evenly trimmed. Upon approaching the main building, she encountered no posted notices or signage. She waited at the threshold until a sister emerged from a side corridor. The sister greeted her calmly and requested identification. Kell presented her letter of authorization, which the sister reviewed in silence. Kell explained her role. The sister nodded and replied that no decision could be made without internal consultation. She asked Kell to leave her documentation and return at a later date. No date was specified. Kell complied and recorded the exchange in her site log. 3 weeks later, the diocesan office received a short typed letter. It stated, "The house remains in observance. No transition is anticipated." The letter was unsigned and bore no seal. The Planning Council reviewed the response. several members expressed concern over the lack of formal signature or corroborating details. However, the legal department advised that without evidence of breach or hazard, the response satisfied the notice requirement. The property was reclassified from potential reassignment to continued exemption. The file was stamped and filed without recommendation. In 1989, an education researcher compiling a historical index of religious teaching institutions attempted to locate records from Our Lady of Peace's early academic activities. The researcher, Dr. Alan Freer, had collected documentation from dozens of convents and was familiar with archival conventions. His inquiries yielded no detailed syllabi, correspondence, or sample materials from the convent. The Diocesan Education Office advised him that all instructional content from the site was managed under cloistered internal provision. He contacted the convent by mail, requesting an interview or inventory access. He received a brief reply: "Instructional materials are not structured for public analysis." He noted the phrase in his final report, along with the comment, "This site maintained separation beyond standard archival reach." In early 1990, the local assessor's office attempted to standardize property records for insurance indexing. Our Lady of Peace was flagged for missing coordinates in the public database. A technician was dispatched to log the structure's perimeter dimensions. His field report indicated that external access was possible, but no measurement verification could be completed. According to his notes, the building's eastern section showed inconsistencies with known mapping standards, specifically in corner angling and eave projection. He submitted a request for clarification. The response from the convent stated, "Perimeter conforms to spiritual use and is not subject to mechanical reduction." The language was forwarded to legal review, which determined no breach had occurred. That same year, a parishioner from a neighboring community attempted to organize a regional prayer circuit and invited various convents to participate in rotating Vespers. Our Lady of Peace was among those contacted. The invitation was returned, unopened, with no note enclosed. In 1992, a re-evaluation of land use ordinances required the Diocesan Asset Office to document all structures eligible for variance extensions. The records for Our Lady of Peace were reviewed again. The office noted that the last confirmed building plan on file was dated 1931 and contained no modern annotations. A follow-up request was mailed, seeking updated schematics. No reply was received. The property was listed as grandfathered non-participating. By 1993, the diocesan yearbook listed Our Lady of Peace with a single line, "Status unaltered." No photographs were included. The entry occupied less than 1 inch on the page. In late 1994, the Diocesan Historian's Office initiated a preservation effort for deteriorating site records. Several letters from the 1940s and 1950s concerning Our Lady of Peace were marked for review, including requests for name clarifications, departure confirmations, and instructional outlines. Each letter was noted as unanswered or declined. A summary file was compiled but ultimately withheld from publication due to incomplete documentation. The convent's name appeared in the index, but without page reference. In 1995, an intern working in the diocesan registry remarked on the absence of standard personnel cards for 22 women associated with Our Lady of Peace between 1932 and 1951. The cards, used to track clerical service, retirement, or laicization, were maintained across all other institutions. She submitted a discrepancy note, which was forwarded to the personnel archive. A senior clerk reviewed the entries and confirmed that the women's names did not appear in any corresponding transfer, retirement, or dismissal logs. A review was proposed but not authorized. The file remained open with the annotation, "Historical Variance Review Deferred." The intern, before completing her assignment, composed a memo summarizing the inconsistency. She concluded, "Records suggest uninterrupted service without conclusion." Her memo was archived but never formally cited. In April 1996, the Diocesan Communications Office discontinued its newsletter column on institutional anniversaries. The decision came after repeated difficulty in obtaining confirmation from older facilities. Among those listed as non-respondents was Our Lady of Peace. No follow-up contact was made. In December 1997, the Diocesan Maintenance Directory issued its final print edition. Our Lady of Peace was included under the section No Scheduled Visits. The address was accurate. The contact field was left blank. The building remained active in tax exemption summaries. Deliveries continued on record. The outer grounds remained orderly according to seasonal aerial imagery. No inquiry arrived from the property. No explanation was offered for the missing names. No closure was filed. The institution did not disappear. It remained, without record of end, transfer, or dissolution. In the spring of 1998, a seminarian preparing a research paper on the evolution of cloistered life submitted a formal request to visit Our Lady of Peace as part of his field study. The letter was professionally drafted and included a list of proposed discussion topics, all within standard ecclesiastical parameters. He received no reply. A second request, sent 3 weeks later by his supervising professor, was returned unopened. A note was attached to the envelope by Diocesan Mail Services stating, "Recipient declined acknowledgement." No further attempt was made. The student excluded the convent from his paper. That same year, the Diocesan Archive moved to digitize its physical floor plan records. While most institutions submitted updates or confirmed existing dimensions, Our Lady of Peace did not respond. The digital file remains incomplete, marked only by a scanned copy of its original 1931 blueprint, which contains no interior annotations beyond room counts and wall placement. The file bears a legacy exemption notice added in July 1998. The note reads, "Status verified as constant." No definition of constant was provided. In September 1999, an aging grounds assessor who had worked with diocesan properties in the 1960s wrote a letter to the Diocesan Planning Board. In it, he described a visit to the perimeter of the convent in 1964, where he had noticed irregular masonry along the eastern retaining wall. He stated that the bricks used did not match the original materials used in construction and that no corresponding maintenance record had been filed that year. The letter was filed without response. A margin annotation reads, "Not actionable, no current discrepancy confirmed." That winter, a property census form issued to all religious holdings included a checkbox section requesting updates on staffing, population, and functional use. Our Lady of Peace returned the form with all checkboxes left blank. Instead, a single phrase had been typed across the margin: "Internal roles are not fixed to external measure." The form was accepted. The digital record was updated to reflect custom reporting format. In early 2000, an interdiocesan research group from a neighboring state requested case study materials on religious institutions maintaining cloister without active apostolate. The request reached the archive office in Rockford, which compiled a list of 6 properties meeting the criteria. Our Lady of Peace was not included. According to an internal email, the archivist in charge of the file remarked that the site operates on a logic not suited to typology. No clarification followed. In August 2001, a maintenance contractor performing electrical updates at neighboring sites attempted to verify a circuit map that crossed under the convent's northern property line. His company had received a regional work order to consolidate overhead and underground wiring for all rural installations. He submitted a verification notice to the convent and left a duplicate with the diocesan utility liaison. Neither received acknowledgement. A week later, he visited the property to assess the location visually. He reported that while the perimeter access was not blocked, the ground markers used to trace cabling appeared to have been recently painted over. No standard color was used. His entry in the field log states, "Unmarked boundary, no entry permitted, signal trace ends abruptly." The incident was documented but marked non-essential, as the routing was later rerouted west of the site. The site entry was closed. In 2003, a civil historian compiling oral accounts of clerical workers from mid-century Illinois traveled to Tarrydale to interview residents with indirect experience of the convent. Several older townspeople recalled delivering goods to the property in their youth. One recalled seeing the same figure at the gate on every delivery for more than 2 years, always accepting parcels without speech. Another described the bell ringing at consistent intervals, though she never saw anyone adjusting it. When asked about the interior, No respondent had ever entered the building. The historian filed a summary that included the note: "No deviations reported. Consistency emphasized across all accounts." The project included audio, but no transcript was published from these interviews. In 2004, the Diocesan Record Board completed a final audit of long-term exemptions granted before 1955. Of the 14 properties reviewed, only Our Lady of Peace had not submitted a full census within the last decade. The audit file was closed with the annotation, "Site continues uninterrupted pattern, exception reaffirmed." No documentation specified who reaffirmed the exception. In the years that followed, the name of the convent remained listed in annual summaries, though without change. It was not removed, reclassified, or reassigned. It received no formal recognition, but no dismissal. Each mention was brief, consistent, and unrevised. By 2006, the site no longer appeared in digital maps of diocesan holdings distributed to seminaries and libraries. Its address was listed only in internal summaries, and only under legacy codes used before the 1980s. The outer property was confirmed to be in use as recently as 2008, when a low-flying survey plane recorded updated topography of the surrounding region. The convent building appeared intact. Roof lines matched the pattern observed in photographs from 1972. No visual deterioration was recorded. In 2009, a retired diocesan clerk conducting private genealogical research attempted to locate the final records of his aunt, who had taken vows at Our Lady of Peace in 1936. Her name appeared in the profession ledger, but no exit or reassignment record could be found. He submitted a formal inquiry through proper channels. The convent returned no correspondence. The diocesan office informed him that no additional data has been preserved at Central Archive. His notes from the research, later deposited with a local historical society, include the sentence, "She may have remained there all her life. I just don't know if anyone was there to see it." As of the last printed Diocesan Facilities Register in 2011, Our Lady of Peace appeared as a line item with no census, no updates, and no incident reports. The property was categorized under active exemption, unmodified. There were no ceremonies, closures, or notices. There were no corrections to earlier files. The entries remained as they had been, brief and final. The house stayed listed. The gate remained catalogued. The names were never restored. If this story impacted you, if you stayed until the end, it's because you feel these hidden truths also need to be exposed. So leave in the comments the city you're watching from. This way we can see how far these stories are reaching. And subscribe to the channel. There are many other cases the world tried to forget, but we insist on remembering. This story is fictional. All names have been edited to protect the source. This video is for entertainment purposes only. But here's a disclaimer. It's based on historical facts,